Hello and welcome to Podsongs, where we interview inspirational people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today, our guest is Wade Davis, the anthropologist, and my musical collaborator and co-host is the Australian musician, William Crighton. Hello, William.
G'day, good to be with you.
Good day, mate. Good evening for me, good morning for you, and afternoon for Wade.
Yes. Hello, Wade. Is he there?
No, he'll be here in 20 minutes, so this is the preamble because we need to get to know you as a musician before we jump into the heavy stuff.
Totally.
And I'm a big fan.
Oh,
yeah, you got a huge sound there. It's really fantastic.
Well, it's been a long journey for me. I'm not 38, and every new thing is a new sound. Every new experience, every new lesson that I learn, I try to put into some sort of soundscape. So, big, small, whatever. So I'm glad that somehow you've found it.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've been on evolution, your journey, and physically as well as musically. But the last album, Water and Dust, is really peaked. I think you've merged all your aspects of your music and your personality together in the lyrics, and it's the musical composition is fantastic.
Thank you, mate. I mean, it felt like getting to somewhere on that. Still, when you do get to somewhere, the search gets wider. So, for instance, like if you get a few steps down the track and then you can see the road opens up another infinite amount of miles ahead of you,
Yeah.
So it's like any undertaking of something. It's if you try to put it in a context and write about it and make that sound. That album in particular, I collaborated with some very special people to create that sound from this place. It sounded Australian, so it sounded like the birds and the creatures and the bush and my dear friend William Barton on the didgeridoo. Oyedaki is the name. A lot of people don't know didgeridoo is the name that white fellas give it from hearing it, but the actual Aboriginal name for it is the Yidaki. So he's a master of that, and so he was able to really add that to the album, and then some wonderful other people, Jeff Lang on playing guitar alongside myself. And we were able to really weave in some nice textures to support the story and the song, because that's something that I'm really interested in is the journey of that song. I was just talking to a friend recently about how, if it was 100 years ago before recorded music, your song, whether it stands the test of time, that's the real test. Do other people pass on the song? And, it's an interesting thing to ask. Maybe if you get one song over your whole career that people would pass on,
yeah.
How do you feel about that?
No, well, I mean, I'm just thinking of all these because you went on a walkabout, and the Aborigines, they sing the song as well. They sing your name is a song, isn't it? The story that you do to tell. So you've been away from Australia a long time, but you've come back and you really embody those values, and it's wonderful. Yeah, you're really so authentic as an artist.
Just telling the story that you can only tell. The story that you know, or not that you know, but that you're trying to know, trying to understand. People sniff bull from a mile off, and so that's something I've always been committed to, for better or for worse. For monetary outcomes is just to try and be true to that, to the music. I have kids, and we have I run a music program in the local prison. My wife and I do that, so we work very closely with inmates in a maximum security jail, having them write songs and whatnot. And so we try and carry that idea of truth and authenticity to your own life, and telling stories through that lens. And a lot of people sometimes get confused and think that is a roadblock to creativity or a
Mm.
roadblock to acting or art or something, that it puts some sort of, no, it's not. I don't find it like that. It's just it's just trying to tell a story through your own lens, and be the best you can at it,
Mm.
and embrace your faults, and try and weed them out as you go, but don't be afraid of wearing them on your sleeve.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So today we're going to talk to Wade Davis. He was your. Some people send me a short list, but you just sent me one name. And I'd already had interviewed him on my other podcast, the Mystic Cast, and that was great. So what? Why Wade?
Well, see, Wade Davis, when you did email me that, and I thought, well, I don't, I hadn't, I researched when you sent me, I researched what you do. And I thought, this is a cool concept, a really interesting thing to do. And I thought, I'll just aim for the top of my list. And if that can't happen, then we'll worry about it then. But
Yeah.
you were credible to actually secure Wade Davis. And I have to say, when you come back and said, Wade can do it, I I was a bit nervous. I was like, holy shit, I'm actually going to have a yarn with Wade.
Yeah.
And so Wade was introduced to me by, who's become a dear friend, Jack Thompson, who's the godfather of Australian cinema, a wonderful actor and just communicator, somebody who's really passionate about the Aboriginal culture here in Australia, who's learned a lot, who's lived with them, and he's just a wonderful person. Anyway, I met him on his 80th birthday.
Mm.
This is a few years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago now. So it's relatively. But when I met him, we just connected. It was this strange kind of thing, like you just feel connected to this fella, and it was reciprocal. And we had this beautiful conversation. And he started to talk about people who had influenced him and who he thought I would benefit from listening to, and Wade was at the top of that list. And so from that conversation, he sent me One River, and then of course I found Wayfinders, and listened to pretty much everything Wade had online, and his way of being his generous hearted self in all of the context that he is in is really inspiring. The way that he is able to not only kind of document some of these travels, but really get inside it and show it the respect that it is, and have a real human experience. There's an authenticity to it, like that you feel that you're there, that he cares about it. And that's kind of, for me, it was rare. And so it just inspired me. He's an inspiring person as a white fella to do that, and to be that beacon of truth and understanding from somebody who's afar. I've never been to the Amazon, I've never been to a lot of those places, yet he brings you right there as if you're next to him on that journey.
Mm.
So that was the big thing that drew me to Wade, and it just so happens so many of my heroes are Canadian without even knowing it. Neil Young, on our way, Wade Davis. It's a funny thing. It's an interesting mix of empire and beauty in that place, that's for sure, and grit. But
Yeah, he's most famous. He's most famous for the Serpent and the Rainbow, isn't he? About when he went to Haiti and found these zombies, slaves.
yeah, exactly, and was looking for that as that zombie, that medicine, and that anecdote he about finding that and tracking that down, and then having the balls and the wit to go in and say, the stuff that you gave me is garbage. We almost got killed to this voodoo priest, and then be convincing enough to walk out of there with the real thing. So that, you know what I'm saying? It was just he backs himself in those times of trial with such grit and humor. Though there's a lot of men I think who would just fold under that pressure, but he kind of, I don't know. That's what I plan on asking him, like how he manages to keep that humor and that creativity and that, in those dicey situations, and still be a lovable character. it's a cool thing. And funny enough, Jack Thompson, who introduced me to Wade's work, it was his 80th birthday, and today's Wade's 70th. I didn't
Today
know
is
that.
his birthday. You're
Today is
kidding.
his. I just because I was thinking
Oh
about
yeah.
old Uncle Jack, who told me about him. I think Jack was 80. I wonder how old Wade is if they're the same. And I looked up, and fair enough, his birthday is today.
Yeah,
So
well,
he's
of course I've got his Wikipedia page. I hadn't noticed. Yeah, we're interviewing on his birthday. Holy moly, I didn't that was yeah, that was quite I just picked a date, but yeah,
yeah,
it's for good of him to speak to us. Yeah.
great of him to speak to us, and it's late on his birthday too. So hasn't held off on any whiskies or anything
Ah.
like. Hope he's I hope
Hmm.
he's in full.
Yeah. Have you ever played in Canada?
Yeah, I've been over there a couple of times. I played the Winnipeg Folk Festival,
Hmm.
and tour with a dear friend of mine, Tara Lightfoot, who's actually she went to university and studied anthropology. So there's a nice little connection there as well, Wade.
Yeah. All roads lead to Wade, yeah.
And I've got some dear friends in a Canadian band called the Dead South, who I've toured with, and I'm about to go on the road again with them here in Australia.
Okay.
And it's just yeah, Canadians have always been in my path, and I've always had friends. Early on, there's a lot of Crichtons in Canada because our Scottish heritage. Um, they left. Part of them went to Canada, and part of them went to Australia. So
Mhm.
definitely
Okay. Yeah, I know you're not trying to tour too much. You're worried about your carbon footprint and you tour solo. So,
yeah, yep. We don't tour. They're a few years ago now. I try to just be. The more I learn about things, the more I just that that quest for curiosity. I mean, I would love to be on the road continuously. If I could bring my family and see new things all the time, that's where I'd be. But I have a
mm,
new appreciation and an understanding of um, of exploring closely things closely and knowing things more intimately, and that is just as wild. It's
yeah.
almost there's a good example of that in that Netflix doco. I don't know if you saw it. Something about an octopus. Anyway, he'd go and visit this octopus. He'd dive down every day into this octopus's lair, and he
Oh
became
yeah, the
friends with.
octopus teacher. Yeah, yeah, I've seen that one.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that was a cool example. Oh, okay, just going back to the same place over and over again. But it speaks to a greater story of just knowing where you are and
Mm,
exploring that. I've been spending a lot of time recently, like in the Wadigans here and Yango, these two massive mountain ranges that are kind of surround the Hunter Valley where we
So where
live.
is the
So
Hunter Valley in Australia?
it's northwest of Sydney, about 200 kilometers. So, and
Okay.
it spans, it goes, it spans right, as far west as sort of a place called uh, Scone, and that's about 200 k's from here. So it's a quite a big catchment area,
Yeah.
and so it's surrounded by these mountains, and then sort of as it tapers off, it spreads out into the plains of the central west New South Wales, and then if you head out a little further, you'll find arguably the oldest man-made structure in the world, the Barorona fish traps, which were a Aborigine structure on the Barwon River that that held fish and kept fish um, quite beautifully in this, about 400-meter long series of rock formations, pools, and little gateways that would survive even the greatest floods. So it's an engineering marvel, but yeah, it's quite interesting. So there's all of those things. There's beautiful stone engravings in the mountains close to here, and some other structures. So it's a beautiful place to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've traveled so much, you must have picked a nice place to settle down and build a family. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Did you play across China as well? Did I read that? Mm.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my early time in China. See, I lived in a little place called Tumut, which was, population 6,000, and that was big compared to I grew up on a farm. The closest town was population 100, so lived in Tumut. I graduated high school, and then I was invited. I enrolled to go to university, and at the same week, I was invited to go and move to China and play in this jazz blues band with a famous Australian piano player. And so I put uni on ice and went to China, and that started a maybe a 5 or 6 year relationship that was going backward and forward to China all the time for different things, and had many close friends, and explored the culture as much as I could. And I haven't been back for a while now, but it's still, China holds a dear place in my heart.
Wow, yeah. I mean, you were 7 years on Walkabout as well, touring and playing, and in
Yeah,
total, yeah. That's
we went around. Yeah, we've been a lot of places, and we found ourselves in all sorts of interesting situations. Been locked up,
yeah,
found ourselves stranded out in the bush. Different, but all managed to get out of these situations, just with trying to be. We've not going to lie. You lose it sometimes, and you get a bit nuts. But if cool headedness and just trying to find the the right way out, or our
mm,
way out, and that's
yeah,
always
yeah,
been us out of trouble. But there's been always more beauty, wonder, and things to learn in those experiences.
yeah. Oh, wonderful. It's informed your music, like I was saying, with the yeah. I mean, yeah, I know it won Best Blues and Roots album, but it could have been a rock album too. It's super pounding, and yeah, it really gets you in the head and the heart, no, and the gut.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the gut's
Yeah,
important.
yeah,
Everything is.
yeah. No, brilliant. So what's next? Are you working on another album or?
Yeah, I'm working on an album at the moment. We've just recently built a little studio out in the back area, so uh, I can duck out there and work on it, which has been wonderful. Because
Hmm.
we put the Jack, our son is called Jack as well. It's a great name, brother. And we put him to bed, and I go out and work out in the studio for a few hours. So that's been going on for 6 or so months now. So
Hmm.
I've starting to get the songs together, and trying to go places I haven't been before,
Mm.
in the trying to
Oh wow,
explore
there's
that.
still unexplored
Oh man, there
areas.
always,
Yeah.
and there's more questions. The more you
Yeah.
learn, I realize how stupid I am. So
Mm.
that kind of the learning and the quest. I mean, I'm a experienced junkie, and I think that's why Wade resonated so much with me the first time I heard him speak, was because I picked up that he's an experienced junkie professor. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
he he, he's able to get into situations, get out of situations, get really know intimate details of things whilst maintaining this genuine heart, and it's just, yeah, it's
Mm.
incredible. That's and you get the sense that he's always learning, that he's
Mm.
always looking, trying to understand the world around him. And so I don't know if I have that capacity to do it in the way, in that he's a very smart man, whereas I just work on my music and work on my output in that way, and learn. But and as you know, do you have kids or anything, Jack? Do you have?
Yeah, I've got one kid now. Yeah, my new father, a year and a half. Yeah,
Mate.
it's fantastic. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
And so you attest how that learning curve, but how natural it is too. How, like, you might freak out before you're going to have a child, but then when he or she comes along, what unlocks in you is this beautiful natural awareness. You still have to
Mm.
work on the,
Oh, it's very
like,
testing. Yeah, yeah.
there's this beauty in it, and this it holds you as much as you hold it. I
Mm,
love
mm.
great informer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I've got a lot from it. Of course, it's yeah. I mean, I work from home too, so I have to spend a lot of time looking after him, and but that's good because I really see him a lot more than most fathers. Not just
Yeah.
in the evening, but also in the daytime.
You your routine? Have you got a good work routine worked out?
Mm, not really, no. We've all got COVID at the moment, so I'm a bit yeah. First time actually, so yeah. So it's really knocked us for six. Bit messed up now.
You're doing well. I didn't pick it. I just you
No, it's been a
yeah.
few days now, so I'm on the up. Yeah, but yeah,
Well to abate it for that long.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, maybe you had a light version of it. So many people are asymptomatic, but no, I'm doing okay now. But it was strange with vomiting, fever. Yeah, it wasn't like the old COVID.
It's strange how it's different every time. I remember
Yeah,
getting it. It it would knock me for six as well. That was just finished playing guitar on Sen and before walked off stage before Deep Purple came on and I just laid down in the dressing room. Enormous headache. I didn't know what it was from. And ended up being COVID. When I had COVID, I've had it three times. Previously to that, the first time it didn't bother me at all. Like I just
mm,
sniffle, you know. But it's anyway. Let's not open all that can of fish.
yeah, yeah. We're in the next. I'm in a good place for the next lockdown. For the next one.
Yeah.
Podsongs was actually I've to thank for COVID because without the lockdown, we had a very enforced lockdown in Italy. It was really we weren't allowed weren't allowed out of the street. You know, at the end of the road, we weren't allowed out of your little commune. So, but I was had to do stuff, so I started Podsongs and got that to thank for it.
Wow. It's I think it was the catalyst for a lot of things like that. We started our campfire series as well. We wouldn't have done that if it weren't
Yeah,
for
there you go. Oh, here's the man himself.
Hey guys, how are you?
so great to be in your.
Thanks for all the logistical work to get this set up.
No trouble at all. Thanks so much for agreeing to chat to us.
My pleasure.
It's your is it right? Am I right in saying it's your 70th birthday?
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
That's
Hard to believe.
we haven't kept you from any whiskeys or anything, have you? Any decent celebrations?
No, I'm mambiando coca like I always do. Amazonian coca, but no, you're not keeping me from anything at all. It's a joy to be with you.
Such a joy to be with you too.
Wonderful. Well, let me introduce you to William here in Australia. He's going to write a song inspired by this hour-long conversation we have together.
That's great. Where are you, William, in Australia?
I'm in the Hunter Valley Wade, which is I get Newcastle would be the closest major city, but it's Oregon Mountain Range and the Yango Mountain Range, about 200 kilometers northwest of Sydney. So,
Wow.
but I'm originally out western New South Wales way. So,
I love Australia. It's kind of like Canada. It's like you could throw England there and they'd never find it. And the scale of the landscape. I remember once I was in Melbourne and someone said, "Oh, we'll just pop out to Perth." And I thought, "Oh yeah, we'll just pop out to Perth." 6-hour flight later, you land on the far reaches of the continent. Yeah, it's such an incredible landscape. I spent a month in Arnhem Land making a film about the songlines and the Dreamtime. Just amazing experience.
I would love to know a bit more about that time because I noticed in some of your the speeches that you've given, you talk about the Aborigines up there quite a bit in their the stasis that they.
Yeah, I mean that the really great guy. There was this kind of like frontier scout who was kind of like an anthropologist, but he was also an administrator called W.H.M. Stammer, and he wrote a great book that was unavailable for a long time called "White Man Got No Dreaming," and it finally got reprinted by I think University of Australia Press or something. But it's just got the best single essay or chapter to explain. It took me for years to understand what the dreaming really meant and what it, and And then once you understand it, you realize that there was no human civilization more antithetical to the Western paradigm than that of Australia, which is why it remains so complicated. You know, it's really interesting, William. I mean, when Europeans arrived here, I'm on the coast of British Columbia, you know, it was very late. I mean, until the building of the Panama Canal, this was about as far from Europe as you could get, you know, maybe this in Australia. And so at a time when the Amazon had been explored for 400 years and Montreal was going into a third century, Europeans hadn't reached here. And yet when they did, you know, they saw a strange world. I mean, they saw a civilization that had achieved greatness without agriculture, but fundamentally they could kind of grok what was going on. You know, there was hierarchy, there was slavery, there was abundance, you know, wealth being measured in accumulated goods and so on. There were a lot of things that were consistent with how Europeans thought of things, but fuck, when they got to Australia, it was just like another dimension of reality, right? And we know that from the studies of the Y chromosome that the Aboriginal peoples of Australia were the first human wave to walk out of Africa. And they only took 5,000 years to get across the underbelly of Asia. And when they reached that parsimonious continent, they went walking and they just established these clan territory. But what you said, you know, the thing that turned me on, Stan turned me on, is that the whole ethos was the antithesis of progress. There was no idealization of change through time. It was stasis, right? And that was so offensive to the British because it was, again, the very opposite of the European notions of progress, you know. So it's just such a fantastically interesting place to be and live, you know. And, you know, I think one of the challenges in Australia is that if you encounter Aboriginal people in the settlements, it's almost, not universally, but almost invariably pretty bleak. The minute you get out on the land, everything changes. You know, just the whole dynamic changes, and it becomes just this glorious kind of non-linear engagement with the natural world. One of the cultures that had made the most impression on me in all my travels.
Totally resonate, and the vast difference as well between, you know, the top end blackfellas and the blackfellas down around here where I'm, Wiradjuri, where I've had the beautiful opportunity to spend quite a bit of time and learn some of their custom and ways and whatnot. And there's a line that resonates from an Aussie poet that says, you know, of climbing Uluru, you know, whitefella wanted to go out there and climb Uluru, and you know, he says whitefella finds his progress prime, blackfella sees no need to climb. You know, has no urge to climb was the line, rather has no urge, and that was it, because it doesn't mean that they see progress in a completely different way. I was saying to Jack earlier about the Brewarrina fish traps, one of the oldest structures in the world, that were this beautifully crafted rock pools and gateways that the fish would get trapped in, but then could get out if enough time were to pass, and they could just come and either spear them or scoop them up in their nets and whatnot. And that was a structure that was in beautiful harmony with the land around. Permanent huts that were on the banks of that Barwon River. You know, so
I mean, I think if there's one thing the most important thing I've learned, you know, which has not, I mean, there's two events in our lifetimes that will be spoken about 10,000 years from now. One was seeing the Earth from space for the first time. And the second is the realization from genetics that we're all cut from the same genetic cloth. Race is a fiction, you know, and the significance of that is not just that it means we're all children of Africa. It's that by definition, it proves that all humans have the same genius. So the whole idea that was invoked to rationalize even the slaughter of the Aboriginal people, that we somehow, you know, went from the savage to the barbarian to the civilized of London, has been absolutely repudiated by science. And what that means is if everybody's got the same genius, how we spend that genius is just a matter of choice. So when you look at, that's why I sort of always try to have a punchline when I tell these stories in public is, you know, the thing about Australia is it's not like these individuals were any less intelligent than anyone else. And you do see that when you see the incredibly sophisticated technologies that are implied in something like the construction of those fishing, traps. But the amazing thing is that you know how we use that is simply a matter of choice. There is no hierarchy in the affairs of culture. We may celebrate technological wizardry. The Aboriginal people are engaged in the threads of memory inherent in myth, And once we realize that, and we realize that skin color, it's just so black and white, cruelest conceit of humanity, comes down to nothing but sunscreen and vitamin D. That's it. I've got this Polynesian friend who does a great stand-up comic thing about sunscreen and vitamin D. And all it is that people in hot climates needed melanin and people in cold climates needed to have sunlight. That's all it fucking comes down to, right? And think of all the agonies through all of history over that cruel conceit that there is such a thing as race. And now, just when we haven't yet seen that really enter the zeitgeist in the way that the vision of the Earth from space will, and the kind of the ideologies of the far left and America in particular's obsession with race, because race is the story of America, the U.S. Is holding us back from that, But hopefully, at one time, it will come through, and things will really change. And cultural myopia, sort of conceit that my way is the real way and everybody else is a failed attempt to be me. That's been the curse of humanity since the dawn of consciousness. And when that is gone, we can maybe actually begin to act as a single people on this solitary planet of ours.
That and all this, when you talk about the little blue dot like that, it gives, we're all indigenous to this place, and we all share these.
Well, it's funny, William. I've got this new collection of essays out, which I could easily happily send you guys. But one of the essays is calling for the elimination of the word indigenous, because just like you said, we are all indigenous to this planet. And what's more, when we identify some people as being indigenous and some people who are not, we're creating a false dichotomy, no more meaningful than the kind of obscene distinction between the primitive and the savage of the 19th century, right? Because there is no such indigenous people or ethnicities are not lost in a sea of indigeneity, an anonymous sort of sea. There's 6,500 cultures that, by ethnographic definition, would be indigenous. But to compare the Nenets reindeer herders of Siberia to the Dogon of the Bandigara escarpment in Mali, to the Torg of the desert, to the, Guarani of the Amazon, is as meaningless as calling, Chinese, Russians, and Americans industrial peoples. And it actually just perpetrates colonial efforts to eradicate identity. And the Haida, for example, here have lived clearly in their archipelago for at least 6,000 years as a single culture. I'm at 70 older than about 100 countries in the United Nations. If you drive from Vancouver to Prince George, which is a city just halfway, 500 miles north of here, you go through more languages than you do from a traveler would encounter from Moscow to Madrid. The territory of the Taltan, where I have my fish camp, is bigger than about 40 countries in the United Nations, including the Kuwait, Switzerland, whatever. So I think we should just start identifying ethnicities with the respect they deserve by their actual names.
I remember sitting across the fire the very first time I was invited out to Mungo, with an elder out there sitting across the fire, and we just finished putting the white ochre onto the malleefowl, which was carved out into the sand. And I said to him, I feel a bit strange being out here as a white fella. I'm Scottish heritage, and now I'm beginning to learn your ways, and it's resonating so heavily with me. It's hitting so much more at home than so many of the things that I've been brought up with. And he just looks across the fire and he says, "Cut me, cut you. We both bleed red. Mother knows no color."
Yeah. It's like my dad used to say, son, never forget that everybody gets up and shits in the morning. It always stinks. He was very egalitarian in that way. Uh, you know, it's like, we have this sort of celebration, particularly in North America, of the cult of the victim. And there's this sort of conceit that, only people of a certain kind of skin tone can be victims. And I always, would say, it's interesting. I would say in my class at the university, I always had a little bonus question where I'd say, in the lifetime of my great-great-grandfather, a disease arrived in my island from another hemisphere that destroyed all of our food. Our colonial oppressor refused to divert ample supplies of alternative foodstuffs to us, so 1 million of my people died. Those who survived fled in rags, not as settlers, but as refugees. Those left behind saw their children taken from their families, condemned to be forced to learn another religious ideology, denied the right to speak their language, such that today only 0.014% of my people speak our mother tongue. And the agony of all that drew generations of our elders into alcohol and depression. Who am I? And you'd be amazed how many white Canadian kids don't get the answer to that, because, the answer obviously is I'm Irish. And in my case, I really am Irish. I have an Irish passport, and I've never suffered, but my family, of course, like everybody else, was part of the diaspora that fled. So, this kind of horrible kind of, everybody, we're all in this kind of together. It's like, my father was a really wise man, William, and he was broken by the war. So I never saw the inside of a church in his presence, but he did believe in good and evil. And whereas my mother used to, she too didn't go to church and had been broken in the war, I suppose. But she retained a certain Christian notion, a kind of vague hope that if we just tried hard enough, good would triumph over evil. The Christ child would triumph over the fallen archangel, the devil. And my dad had no illusions, but he did believe in good and evil. He used to say to me, there's good and evil in the world, son. Take your side and get on with it. And it was really good advice, because what he was saying is that we can never defeat darkness. Good and evil walk hand in hand, and they have done so forever. All you can do is pick the right side and do what you can. And that attitude is very helpful, because if you don't expect to win, you're never disappointed when you lose, and you continue to fight. So, one of the things I was thinking about, I just got off the phone, I'm 70 years old as of today. And without even thinking it, I'm planning this massive expedition to climb on the sacred pilgrimage with the mamas, the sun priests of the Arawakos, from the beach to the ice fields of Saranqua to make ritual payments. And it never even crossed my mind whether this is like climbing up to 20,000 feet from the sea. And it never even crossed my mind whether at 70, this is something I should be thinking about. Maybe it was in my past. I still have the same energy and zeal and idealism, largely because I'd never expect to win. It's, life is like a pilgrim's path. The goal is not a destination. It's sort of a state of mind, And, that's a really important way that I keep alive.
How do you do that? Because I notice, you're a father, you're a husband, and you constantly talk about being having optimism, and that being a responsibility. And then, but you also draw on this humor and this trickery. Like I recall when you were set yourself on fire, and
yeah, that was
that. And then and now you're talking about going on this journey, and the prospect of failure is not seeming to cross your mind, and nor should it. But can you just give me some insights into how you maintain that?
It's not that I'm in any way unique. We all, life is not linear, and you look back, life is actually for everybody a series of these moments where you have to make a choice, and I always try to encourage young people to find their inner compass, obviously. So the choices aren't imposed upon them from anybody, or the society, because the ultimate creative challenge in life is to be the architect of that life. And if you can look back on a life of decisions made by you, whether they were all the right ones or the wrong ones, it doesn't matter. You made them, you own them, they made you who you are. Bitterness always comes to those who look back on a life of decisions imposed upon them, right? And when I was young, I had a loving family, but a very simple family. Sometimes, William, when I'm lecturing, this happened to me. I was doing a keynote at the World Ayahuasca Conference in Girona, Spain. And I do so much public speaking. I'm sure sometimes when you're singing a song, you can almost, the song is singing you, so you can almost leave your body and watch you down from above playing that tune, right? Because you're not actually playing it. Every musician knows that they don't sing the song sings them. And you look down at that body playing that guitar with that lovely voice or whatever, how the fuck did this happen? I mean, where did that little boy that used to throw stones into the creek emerge to become this bearded, accomplished and realized musician, right? Well, it's a million different things, right? But I was very lucky that I just viscerally did not know how to compromise. And I knew that to escape that kind of bourgeois world, I just had to jump off cliffs, and there's a friend of mine, Terence McKenna, always said, the message of the sage, you jump off the cliff and you don't land on rocks. The world exists to lift you up, not to beat you down. And you end up landing on a feather bed. And a friend of mine, Jim Whittaker, who was the first American to summit Everest, always says, if you're not living on the edge when you're young, you're taking up too much space. And when I was young, I just cultivated a single word in my vocabulary, and that was yes, for any new experience. I remember actually, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I was tripping on mescaline when the Beatles' Yellow Submarine first came into the theaters, and a bunch of friends of mine and I took some mescaline. We went to see the movie, and there was just this one moment where Peter Max's cartoons was just blasting a little kind of, a word bubble by someone's head, just going, yes, yes, yes. And it just seemed to me that was a good way to approach the world, and I've done that all my life. I mean, to the point where it's very difficult for me to say no to anything because I've crafted a life by saying yes. And, I think optimism is a choice. I mean, just as pessimism is an indulgence. I mean, orthodoxy, the enemy of invention, despair, an insult to the imagination. I mean, how can you not be optimistic if you're just alive? I mean, the sheer glory of being blessed to have this sentient existence, given all the complex, miraculous interactions, chemical, spiritual, whatever, that had to come together to create you. Gosh, I mean, I'm going to enjoy every minute of the ride.
That's so cool. Do you take that where you can, obviously, because I know you say, some things are psychedelic or hallucinogenics, but then when you look back, no one's at home, so they're not. That made me laugh when I heard you say that. But do you try and
particular or tryptamine is like that?
Unconscious in the, do you have a mindset that you take into those experiences, or do you just try to let that journey take you on whatever it's going to take you on?
I sort of have this sort of almost ridiculous reputation for being some kind of, psychedelic expert. I was lucky to study with Schultes, who was the pioneer, and at a time when these plant traditional hallucinogens were not that well known. I mean, when I first took ayahuasca in 1974, I mean, I could have told a million people, many of whom had taken other psychedelics, and they wouldn't even known what ayahuasca was, right? It was pretty obscure. And it's very much in along the lines of that, just saying yes. But I also was very kind of judicious in a way. I was very much in the school of Ram Dass or George Harrison, I suppose, get the message and hang up. I mean, I never was one who felt, I never really used, I'd be lying to say that I didn't take psychedelics occasionally and just go to a Grateful Dead concert and have a lot of fun. Of course we did. That was part of the joy of it. But in a deeper level, I I'm always astonished to recall that, you know, John Lennon claimed to have taken LSD 1,000 times. I can't even imagine what that would do to you. You know, I like the idea you get the message and you hang up. You know, you see this world that's a possibility, and you then spend your lifetime absorbing in a way the consequences of that experience. You know, and I also think that, you know, you do things in phases in life. So I found certainly that. When I was young and trying to deconstruct the world that had been imposed upon me, I found psychedelics incredibly useful, you know. And that's why I had that sort of quip about, you know, our parents saying, don't take these things, you'll never come back the same. And of course, that was the entire point. But then once I began to forge my own world, both in terms of a career as a writer, a scholar, whatever, a father, you know, a homemaker, you know, I wasn't interested in blowing apart that world. I was trying to consolidate that world and create that world, you know. And so at that time in my life, I didn't find psychedelics very helpful. They often, in fact, induce confusion, even paranoia, right? And then maybe now, you know, I've been giving some thought. I mean, I've obviously through the years, like for example, when I was writing a book, One River, I wanted to remember what the Yahe experience was. I took ayahuasca a few times to do that. You know, I've made films where in the traditional setting, ayahuasca is used. Of course, I've taken it in those contexts. But and I may return to some more kind of reflective or recreational use of psychedelics at some point in my life. But you know, it was just one of many influences on my life. And you know, I mean, I was equally moved by my experience with spirit possession, not personal experience, because I think that'd be ludicrous, but what I experienced in Haiti. You know, and the Haitians always say, you know, white people go to church and speak about God. Indians eat their magic plants and speak to God, and we dance to the temple and become God. I mean, that's what spirit possession is really all about, right? So, I mean, I've always been intrigued by that human desire to invoke some technique of ecstasy, to kind of soar away in the wings of trance, to get into a different realm of consciousness, and whether that is aspiring to reach some kind of luminous connection with the sacred. And the sacred is very different than religious aspiration. I mean, religious aspiration is all about death. I mean, every religion at the end of the day is just an attempt to wrestle with eternity and come out on top, right? But the sacred isn't about death. It's got nothing to do with death. It's all about life and the sentient life that lies around us in this moment, on this jewel of a planet. You know, that's why D.H. Lawrence, you know, famously said, you know, before the Buddha spoke and Jesus walked, you know, the nightingale sang. And long after the Buddha is gone and Jesus is gone, the nightingale still will sing, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about music and psychedelics just for a second, because, you know, in my experience, there's very tight sort of ceremony and ritual around the use of those of psychedelics in First Nation cultures and whatnot, and what I've experienced. And the same goes with the music. You know, music is, you know, a conveyor of science and tradition and story, but it is also, like you say, a vehicle for being for connection with the other, whether it be the ancestors or the ground or the air or the nothing, whatever it is. You know, it's that connector. And I wonder how, in your travels and the relationships you've are involved in the music and whatever.
Yeah, let me. Hey, William, you might right. Just put my. It's so funny you should say that, because I there's a passage in this, if I can find it, this, I don't know if you know the great Colombian singer Carlos Vives, but he's kind of the biggest Latin American star, and he's just an unbelievable. Yeah, and I just wrote this about him. You know, my daughter, I love music, but I'm not musical. My daughter is an amazing musician and songwriter. And, And I'll just read a couple lines here. So, this is describing him on stage with my daughter's band singing her song, but and her band was an unknown band, basically. So sharing the spotlight, as he so often does, bringing little known acts into his circle and allowing them to shine in public as never before, is a sign of both his immense generosity and his profound belief that music is a universal muse that, like a spirit being, reaches out to all as the ultimate weapon of love. It is not the artist that sings a song, he would say. It is the spirit of the song that sings the artist. The stage is a temple. Music serves as prayer. Dancers spin into trance. The audience, as congregation, rocks to the rhythms of devotion, not for the artist, but for his art. Songs that touch the far reaches of the soul, the most passionate depths of emotions, even while grounding the spirit in the soil of a nation, leaving everyone not damp with sweat, but moistened by the purity of the rains, the promise of the rivers, drenched in all the possibilities of a new day. And that, to me, that's what Carlos does to an audience. But, I've seen the same thing. I'm really good friends with the Grateful Dead. And, I've had long talks with Bobby Weir and Mickey Hart about just what they're doing on stage, and they're incredibly humble. They absolutely see the music themselves as vehicles for the music in a way that is enchanting almost in its modesty.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a beautiful passage too. Thank you for sharing that. When you talk about the plants, when that resonated, because some of the black fellows here say the same thing. Well, the plants tell us how to mix them up. It's sort of the same as the songs. Like the songs, like the man says, it sings through you. And when you experience that, that's I try and write as much as I can, and that's a thing, that's kind of the ego or whatever you want to call it, working to formulate something. But the best stuff I've ever done, or the best experiences that I have ever had, is when there's none of it, when it's just like you're purely just that conduit for whatever you're picking up on. And nobody is, there's no one person that has that, like you say, monopoly to that power. It's like everyone has that, I feel. I do some work with my wife, and I do some work with prisoners in jail here in the maximum security prison, and we have people who come in and they've never had anything to do with music. And then they start playing music and they begin to feel that thing, and it takes them over. And that is that ancient, but eternal, wondrous power source and an information source, And so I just wonder, in the modern world, with passages like that as a guide as well, like what's a way forward in that optimism that you do have? Do you see an actual probable way forward where we can kind of fuse the knowledge that is available and in this, in a path that isn't, is not going to destroy everything? And
well, I think it's important. All there's certain universal challenges that humans have. We're violent and so on, but the kind of standard challenges we're looking at now, from climate change to species extinction, become threats to humanity. But it's important to remember that they weren't caused by humanity. They were caused by a very narrow subset of humanity with a particular ideology, right? And once you realize that there is no hierarchy in the affairs of culture, that every culture has something to say, each deserves to be heard, that every culture is just an answer to a fundamental question: what does it mean to be human and alive? Then you can begin to look at our own culture and ask yourself, why did we begin to think as we do, right? Particularly about the natural world. And I think one answer to that is that as we liberate ourselves from the tyranny of absolute faith and the Enlightenment, we threw out all notions of myth and magic, mysticism, but critically metaphor. And we deanimated the world. Science made a house cleaning of belief. The idea that a flight of a bird could have meaning was ridiculed. And yet most cultures are, and once you deanimate the world, you can easily see how one's interaction with it becomes based on extraction. If a mountain's a pile of rock, you cut it down, or a forest, you cut it down. But most cultures have interacted with the natural on more of a reciprocal basis. You know, some basic iteration of the idea that the earth owes its bounty to people, but people in turn owe their fidelity to the earth. And that's played out in ritual and cultures all around the world. And metaphor is so important, because if you believe that a mountain's a deity, you're going to have a different relationship to it than if you believe that it's a pile of rock. And it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's how the belief system manifests itself in human behavior with consequences for the ecological footprint of any one culture. And so one of the reasons to celebrate all these other visions of life is not to denigrate our own, but to put our own in kind of global perspective. And in effect, to put the lie to those of us in our culture who say that we cannot change when we know we must change the fundamental way we interact with the natural world. And, you know, the way we do that is both through science and also through new layers of understanding that can be facilitated by these other visions of life itself. I mean, the more and more we scientifically learn about the way forests operate, you know, the more wondrous they become, and the more, in a way, accurate appear some of the intuitions that Indigenous people have, like the Barasana and the Makuna, you know, in the Northwest Amazon. You know, their most profound intuition by which they live is that plants and animals are just people in another dimension of reality. When you really get down to the level of DNA, they're quite right, right? And so, you know, and because of this, we're going through so many incredible changes. I mean, we're so impatient because most of us have no sort of sense of time or history. I mean, a good exercise is just to think of your great-grandfather or great-grandmother and what they thought about everything from gender to race to the environment to the nature of divinity, you name it. And you suddenly find that there's not a single thing they believe that you agree with. And in fact, most of what they agreed about, you would find not only wrong, but morally reprehensible, right? So how did that happen? Well, it happened because we began to think in new ways. And a lot of that was the gift of anthropology. So, I mean, if you, for example, think it's normal that a Jewish girl would pursue the Buddhist Dharma, or that an Irish lad would fall in love with a Asian woman or whatever, you know, if you believe that, you know, every religion is a legitimate path to divine. If you think that you know, we preserve jam, not culture. If you think that, you know, 2 men or 2 women can be good parents as long as there's love in the family, you go down the whole list, and it means you're a child of anthropology, because all of these notions grew out of ideas distilled mainly in North American anthropology by this group of really amazing scholars and contrarians who gathered around Franz Boas, and they didn't live to see their ideas enter the zeitgeist as they have, but we today live in the social realm of their dreams. And that change has happened within a generation or two. I mean, within a generation, women have gone from the kitchen to the boardroom, people of color from the woodshed to the White House, you know, gay people from the closet to the altar. I mean, you know, we're capable of incredible cultural change and scientific innovation. And again, that remains part of the foundation of my optimism.
Fair enough. That's interesting, because it's, I just, in comparison, like, it feels like we know what's in our heart. Like, I mean, we know what we need to do. It's just trying to get there. Like, I know if my grandmother, who was a very staunch, you know, Christian, and she had her ideas, and I know where she was also very loving, you know, she would have this.
Oh, I'm not, yeah, I wouldn't, these, you know, again, these folks were wonderful, loving people. We should revere them as ancestors. They were just, again, they were children of their own era, you know. And my point is not in any way to denigrate even what they thought, reprehensible as some of it may seem to be. It's just that, you know, change is not only possible, it's happening around us all the time. I mean, I just think about it. In 1911, the Oxford English Dictionary did not have an entry for the word racism, because the superiority of the white man was accepted as a given. 1902 in Melbourne, in your country, it was debated in Parliament as to whether or not Aboriginal people were human or not, right? I mean, this isn't to knock Aussies or the settlers of that era. Change happens so quickly that I find myself, that's sort of a key to my optimism. I mean, it's a sort of race between good and evil in a way, but
That's what interrupt you. I didn't take for a second that you were being. I was saying with her, I know that it would have only been her having the exposure of sitting around a fire with an elder and actually having an experience, sharing a smoke or sharing whatever, and that would unlock, because that exposure to that is, you can't deny that. It speaks straight to the human heart.
And that's the things that, Martin Luther King was so great, because he wasn't just opposed to racism, he was opposed to the system that created the racist, that's exactly like your grandma. A decent, kind woman like your grandma, if given a chance to, see some of these beliefs that she had just sort of inherited, she'd repudiate them. And she probably did it in her gestures anyway, because she was probably decent and kind. So I mean, I think that's just a kind of source of optimism. I mean, one of the other things, William, what is life but a story we lose the power of comprehending as we get old? And one of the things that I think is really not honorable is when old people tell younger people, "Oh boy, you missed it. It was so great. Oh, too bad. It's all over." What a horrible, it's like the commencement speaker at a college who tells a graduating class, "Well, the world's all fucked up. It's up to you to fix it." Like hell it is. We're the ones who fucked it up. Just lighten up. And I just have a very Buddhist sense of life moving on. No matter what happens, the birds still sing, and I don't indulge pessimism because it's just so unhelpful. That doesn't mean you're naive or not concerned, but you can, as a public speaker, for example, or even as a writer, you can leave an audience, ready to go for the shotgun, and maybe you'll think you're effective, but it's much more effective if you can unveil to an audience a dire scenario that they may not have thought about, but leave them at the end of the day storming out of the hall, ready to do something about it.
Yeah, and I mean, whether we like it or not, we're going to be subject to somebody's retrospective judgment. Like I see that with my kids as well. I have 14-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old daughter, and
Yeah, how old are your kids? How old? 14. Oh, wow. Is that a son?
daughter is 14, another daughter is 10, and Jack is 2. And that is family, and those family structures are something that we do inherit, the way to do it. And then when you pass the ball to be, a father. I mean, for me, you can probably speak a lot more eloquently than me about it, but it's like, for me, it was like, well, fuck, righto, now it's decision time. And for me, I had to, as much as you're learning on the fly and trying not to fall into habits of ancestors that you didn't particularly like, at the same time, you learn so much and you have a new respect, because like, it's not easy. It's incredibly beautiful and wonderful, and you learn a lot from it, but it's not fucking easy.
No.
And
nobody gets out of parenting unscathed.
And I think I draw a comparison a little bit to that personal relationship and this as a country. We're trying now. It's like our ancestors have fucked up a lot of things. It doesn't mean that they were all horrible people. In fact, it's the opposite of that. There's a lot of people who are great people. We're just trying to learn our lessons, but now we've inherited this. So what do we do with it? We have a bit of our own choice. We have some of those anchors to the past that we either have to cut loose or wind up, and but some of them keep us steady as well. So it's just trying to that balance. And I think that's what really drew me to you in the first place when I first heard you. When old Uncle Jack Thompson, a great movie actor, here and who has become a dear friend, told me about you, because you can just walk this. You seem to be able to articulate and walk this line of balance through life and sum it up, which I find really uh, beautiful. And as a male role model, I don't think there's a better one on the planet than
Oh,
yourself.
that's great. You know, one of the things that really intrigues me is landscape and character. And when I think of an Aussie, you know, first thing I ever do when I go to a place is pay attention to the landscape. And um, Lawrence Durrell called it the invisible constant of a place, and he said you could depopulate France and resettle it with Amazonians, and within a generation the national traits would reemerge. The affection for fine wine and food, a reflexive disdain for Americans. This just would come out of the soil of France. And I really think that's true. Canada is such a remarkable place, and it has in common with Australia the weight of the landscape, And I mean, you could take the United States and turn it on its side and plunk it into Canada and still have 1,500, 2,000 kilometers of Canada going away to the north, right? Americans look west for heroes, Canadians look north. And the weight of the winter kind of hovers, or at least traditionally has hovered in the imagination and defined the essence of the soul of the country. I mean, you can't even imagine a Canadian politician wrapping themselves in the flag. We didn't even have one until 1965. And then the country came to a halt arguing about one or three maple leaves. The perfect expression of our patriotism is a line of French verse that says, "My country's not a country, it's winter." And I think that way in Australia, So, I mean, I love the idea of music in Australia coming out of the sands and soil of that place. Such diversity from the Daintree to the Western Desert. I mean, from Kimberley to Tasmania. I mean, just such an incredible landscape. And the very fact that a country that at one point was literally, shooting Aboriginal people with impunity has now gone on this really tortuous and very difficult self-examination. And it's not easy. It's not one side right and one side wrong. It's a conundrum. But at least the effort's being made to find some kind of reconciliation so that you emerge not necessarily as one people, but as a mosaic of peoples with different visions of life that can form one another, all for the common good. And I mean, there's something about that Australian character that just speaks to that landscape. And I've always found that incredibly intriguing.
We had a recent referendum here on a voice.
Yeah, I knew all about it. Yeah, I do know about that. And it failed, right?
Failed. But the thing is, what was disappointing to me was the context of it. So much of the debate was about how we, in inverted commas, as the nation, need to help Indigenous people. We need to, give, more service for Aboriginal people, more of this. And like, it kind of focused on how
pathetic they are. It's like, it's also fucking patronizing, it's like, it's so funny, like there's this thing in universities over here, at least, that you can't even fart in a native community without permission from on paper of every person or whatever, and it seemed to be this sort of protection of intellectual property. And obviously ethnic groups should have every right to say, I don't want to be pestered by some young anthropology student. Thank you very much. But on the other hand, the whole kind of exercise is so inherently paternalistic, like in my experience. I mean, I've been all around the world and with cultures of such variety and wonder. And I've never been anywhere where they weren't perfectly capable of looking after themselves. I mean, I remember in Haiti, my main informant was a guy called Erard Simon. Became a good friend. He had been an emperor in the secret societies. He had been run the Tonton Macoute for almost a quarter of the country during the early revolution. I once asked him if he had killed anybody during the original Duvalier Revolution in 1957. And he said, I never killed any people, just enemies. And he always packed a 38 special when he, Erard didn't need to be protected from anyone, especially me, and I, when I think of the Haida or my tall tan friends, Jesus, I've got one tall town. I shouldn't say this, but um, I mustn't say it. Actually, it's kind of too private. But believe me, someone messed with him to their regret. I mean, you know, yeah. I mean, I one of the things that I think I really do have, William, is a truly egalitarian sense of wonder about people. I never ever could conceivably think of myself as being in any way but an equal with every human being I meet. And that ability to, the one thing I'm good at in the world, I don't know, I think because I've just been doing it for so long, and frankly I have such an open heart. I can go into any cultural scene anywhere in the world, and it's like I have kind of radiant antenna, and I just instantly, like in 3 dimensions, know the whole setup. I know who's in charge. I know what should be done, what the protocols are, what I shouldn't do, what I can do, and a lot of it is, of course, not based on anything more exceptional than the same traits of character that would make me welcome in your house on a holiday. Self-deprecating humor, an openness, a willingness to sleep where I'm asked to sleep, eat what's put in front of me, pitch in, and be decent. It's not rocket science, but it is amazing how many people, because of for all kinds of reasons, find themselves incredibly awkward and nervous and in a cross-cultural moment, and if you can find like I always say in Colombia, I am a Colombian citizen, and it's like my second home. And I always joke that, because I'm not at all musical, as I told you, I can't dance cumbia, and I certainly can't dance salsa, but I can dance cumbia.
That's great. But just to speak a little more on that about the, without getting political, I found, and you answered some of it in your point, is that it is a little awkward for some white fellas or people who aren't Aboriginal. They feel that weight that is put on them by whoever they're listening to. However, there are so many examples in history of convicts or whoever running off with the Aboriginal people, becoming part of their culture, which speaks massively to me. It's like these cultures just aren't for, there's 350 different nations here, at least in this country.
Well, there's 670 dialects in Australia.
It just isn't. It's not just for, and they'll say themselves, this isn't just for black fellas. This is culture. This is a way of living.
The most amazing thing about culture is that every human population, delineated by language or history or occupancy, nevertheless faces the same exact adaptive imperatives. We all have to have kids. We all have to feed our kids, educate our kids. We have to find ways to come together, man and woman, that are consistent. We have to deal with the inexorable mystery of death, the agony of growing old, questions of what lies beyond death, all that stuff. And that's common to every culture. And what's so fascinating is that despite that, within that common experience as human beings, we answer or we address those issues in so many different ways. It's so fascinating, right? And yet, at the end of the day, there is this commonality to the human experience. And so if you can, I find that when I'm working in a cross-cultural setting, what I'm doing all the time, almost reflexively, without thinking, is I'm expressing my common humanity with every gesture, with every phrase, with everything I do, and it seems to come across. And then my respect for the differences also seems to come across. And so I can't think of any place in the world that I've gone that I haven't been warmly received, because hospitality, again, is the international language, right? And I guess I find a lot of hope in those I once was in the Sahara, about been 1,000 miles north of Timbuktu, and I came down, and I ran into a camel caravan, and they got an unusual rain shower had and fallen on them, and the salt they were transporting from the mine had gotten wet. And if it gets wet, it breaks, and then loses all value. And they were about 200 miles from a well, and they were forced to stop to let the salt dry out. And they had all the wealth of their families in that circle by that camp. And they were down by the time we came upon them to a single liter of water. And there were 8 men and all the camels. And they just dispatched this one fellow into the desert. And I photographed him from a distance as he kind of mirage-like was looking for a distant, shallow a spot where they thought they could dig for water. But it was miles away. And, in the Sahara, it said that the great thing about brake fluid is that it keeps you off the battery acid, And as we came upon them, what did they do with that last liter of water? They immediately kindled a twig fire to brew us tea, honoring the Bedouin adage, or the Berber or the Tamachek. All have the same torg, the same value system, that you will slaughter the last goat that gives the milk that keeps your children alive to feed a wandering stranger, because you never know when you'll be that stranger, in need, coming out of the darkness of the desert. And I remember watching Muhammad pour me that first little cup of tea and thinking to myself, in the middle of the Sahara, we're hundreds of miles from anywhere. And I just looked at him pour that tea, and I thought, my God, these are the moments that allow us to hope.
Yeah, that resonates. That human communion of just sharing that time and space is and that genuine interaction speaks.
When I was in Haiti, it was really funny in Haiti. I mean, the most common thing that was ever said to me in Creole was "Qui qualité de sayo?" What kind of white are you anyway?
And actually, because I've heard you say that a few times, and it always makes me laugh. And certain things, not as obviously, but things like that have been leveled at me as well over time, but not to the extent of yourself. But I was going to ask you, at age 70, which is young, you're about to go up a fucking mountain hike and do that thing like you were saying. When you look at who do you see yourself as? Like where do you fit? You know what I mean? This is kind of a stupid question, but like when you look in the mirror now, when you woke up this morning, is it, if you could ever think back to, in your early 20s, are you one of those people who you would look at and say, well, they've got 50 years on me, like you mentioned, they've done all this stuff? Are you one of those people who you would have idolized when you were a kid?
Yeah. I think very much so, in the best sense of the word. I remember when I was young, I had these heroes, and I would write to them. And when the ones that would write back would not just make my day, but just, and that's why, for example, William, I get hundreds of emails from young people from all around the world, but I answer every single one because they're not really writing to ask about something. They always have a question. They're really asking, am I somebody? Can I reach out to someone I admire? I think that's one of the real obligations of becoming an elder. Is to sow seeds of dreams in young people. To make young people feel that they're somebody, because there's so much in the world that is telling them that they're not. And when I look back on my life, I mean, one of the things my sister always says about me is that no one seems to know how tough you are, and what she means by that is not like bravado or even physically tough, but no one, as she witnessed, was more desperate almost to know what my destiny would be in the 20s. I was fiercely ambitious, not for fame or money, but just to know where this unbelievable amount of energy I had was going to become manifest, right? And when she says tough, she says, you had all that desire, but you never compromised, and you somehow found a way in all your madness to wait long enough for your destiny to find you. And I think that's something I say to young people, never compromise, but be patient and give your destiny time to find you, because a vocation or a career or any life path is like marriage. It can sometimes be easier to get into than get out of, right? And life's a long race. And, when I look back on that kind of vagabond boy, wandering around South America at 19 and 20, it's just kind of a miracle to me that it ended up, those sorts of values were viable and not insane, and ended up creating what I would say is a completely content and realized scholar. I mean, I have no regrets. I never use a conditional tense, that as in should have, could have, would have. Life hasn't been perfect; it shouldn't be. But I've had a really blessed life when I think about it. It's almost bizarre, and part of that is that I never worried about failure. I mean, I say to young people, put yourself in the way of opportunities, not necessarily as a schemer, but as an opportunist, in the sense that you put yourself in the way of opportunities where there is no choice but success. And you suddenly find yourself achieving things that would have been beyond your imaginings a few short months before. One of the hardest things I had to learn as a kind of a child of the bourgeoisie, if you will, was that creativity is not an objective force. We used to say in school, oh, Sally's creative, the Beatles are creative. No, creativity is not the motivation of action. It's a consequence of action. You can't be creative if you don't do. And it took me a long time to really understand that. And if you had said to me at the age of, 14, 15, that I would be a writer, a photographer, a filmmaker, that would have been so far beyond my possible imaginings that it could have actually worked against me, because, life is something that happens step by step. Vocation's not, or a career's not something you try on like a coat. A vocation is just a metaphor. It's a lens through which you see the world, and only for a time. And the goal is to make life itself your vocation. The art of being alive, knowing that nothing can be anticipated in life, and that it takes time to forge something that's never existed before, which is the wonder and uniqueness of a individual human existence.
Like that Picasso quote, inspiration will come, but it has to find you working, or whatever.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. He also said, if it works, it's obsolete, which is something that I've always followed. The minute I get good at something, I end up going off to do something else.
that line between, because you say, try and be the architect of your own life, but it's a fine line between planning too much and being open to the wind when you get there. Sort of.
Yeah, I mean, when I say plan, try to be the architect of your own life, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be decisive and confident in your every step. I mean, I was the least decisive person on the planet in my early years. The key to my ability to quote unquote give my destiny time to find me was that I was, for reasons I will never fathom, simply incapable of compromise. Even when I wanted to compromise, I couldn't really do it, and that, as much as any kind of character trait of being decisive, because I certainly was not that. But I also had some really lucky breaks along the way. I mean, any one of my books could have flopped. Any one of the theories I had could have proven to be completely wrong. Or I remember once, just an amusing story, that when I was 23, I just come out of working for. I also never thought anything was beneath me. Like when I graduated from Harvard, I was a very precocious botanist. I'd been 2 years in the Amazon. And my poor father had spent half of his savings, not just his income, to send me to that fancy university. Suddenly sees his son take a job in the lowest rung of the toughest logging camp in British Columbia, right? But that's what I felt I needed to do at that time. And it was a fantastic thing to do, right? Some years later, I was actually on a TV show with the head of the IWA, the union, right? A man called Jack Monroe, who's probably at that time the most powerful man in Western Canada. And he was furious that he thought this young whippersnapper environmentalist was ambushing him on this TV show, right? Because the producers hadn't told either him or me that we're going to be on together. And just before going to air, I was able to lean over to him and whisper, Mr. Monroe, I just wanted to thank you. Your union put me through university. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, it's your union. Where'd you log? What was the local? And suddenly we went to air, and I proceeded to say exactly what I was going to say about corruption in industry and government in particular, and that it wasn't the men and women fighting off hunger in a logging camp with a chainsaw that were the problem. And everything I said, Mr. Monroe knew to be true, but he couldn't say it because he was, the head of the union for the whole country, And but before we went off air on live television, he had his arm around my shoulder, and he said, I don't speak as good as this kid because I didn't get to go to college, but I'm telling you, this is the kind of fine young man my union makes for the province of British Columbia. And there, talk about turning a situation, around like that. And then another time, I was so uncertain that I applied to graduate school in botany and law school as if they were the same thing. And I got into both. And I went to pick up my sister, who was articling in a posh law firm. And this wonderful older woman behind the reception looked up at me and she said, are you Karen's brother, Wade? You just came back from the Amazon. You eat these weird plants. You follow me. And she took me by the hand and walked me back to this incredibly awful law library where she had set up a wooden ladder that lifted me up to come face to face with a British solicitor from the 18th century. Fat, hooked nose, the wig, the whole works, And from the bottom of the ladder, she just said, is that you? And I looked at this lithograph. I said, fuck no. I came down the ladder. She took me by the hand, went to the front desk. I called the law school, retracted my successful application, and went off to study with Professor Schultes at Harvard. So I've had some lucky breaks like that.
I mean, yeah. And that empathy that you speak of, like getting to know the logging and actually logging, that speaks volumes to me. I grew up in a logging town, and my dad's a farmer as well, and so we're always having these backward and forward sort of discussions. But until you know the way, you can't really speak to it, because that's
like everybody in Colombia in the Medio Magdalena, they always, the forests have been largely cut down in many parts of it for cattle. And you can, environmentalists, will say, oh, they cut down the forest, well, I just was talking with the ex-president about this. I mean, the phrase in Spanish, tumbar el monte, technically means cut down the forest, but it means so much more. It's keeping the wild at bay. And, I tried to say once to an audience is these men didn't set out to destroy the forest. They set out to liberate the sky.
That's, yeah.
Well, tell us, listen, it's actually my birthday today. I've got my sister coming over in a little bit. Is there anything more I can really help you with, William? We can always jump back on another time. It's really fun that you're going to do this.
I'm so excited to dig into the words. I've been in a bit of flow, so I'll go back and look over what you've said, and you've already influenced a bunch of my stuff anyway. So,
well, that's so. It's so flattering, and I find it such an honor that you could. And what a world we live in, that someone popping up in Canada can have a few ideas that can influence a kid who pops up in the mountains of Australia and puts it to music. What a beautiful thought.
It's when Jack first up and told me about the concept of this podcast, he said, could you make me a list of some people you'd like to speak to? And there was only one person on that list, and that was yourself. So I'm thankful that.
Well, it's great. And if you need, honestly, if anything you need or anything, a lot of these ideas are in that book of mine, The Wayfinders, that was published in Australia in Perth. But anything else, just email me. I'm just going home back to east to look after my little godson over Christmas, but I'll have lots of time there between diapers and bottle feeding. So. If you need anything else from me, just reach out.
So much, Wade. It was so great to meet you, and it's I'll just share one small thing with you. The fellow who told me about you, Uncle Jack Thompson, he's a dear friend of mine now. I met him on his 80th birthday, and now I'm meeting you on your 70th. It's quite
how great!
interesting.
Well, I'll still be around. I'll come and look you up next time I'm down under. I was just in Brisbane, which is I actually love Brisbane, and I love everything Australia. A lot of places. It's so big. I mean, I have never been to Tasmania. I've never been to Adelaide. I've never been to your country. I've never even been up the Murray River, really. It's so, and Kimberley. The Kimberley is where I really want to go. Yeah. So,
please, yeah, and I would love to share some time with you. And
okay, fella. Best to your family. Take care, Jack. Thanks for setting this up, fella.
No worries. Happy birthday.
And Jack, if I can, anything you need for William or anything, just pop me an email, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Hey.
Jack. That was incredible, mate. Got to chat to Wade, and wow, he shared some beautiful knowledge and some wonderful insight, and on his birthday too.
Yeah, that's special. Yeah.
Much for making that happen. It really, it really was a special thing.
Yeah, well, take your time, digest it, and let's bounce some ideas back and forth for some songs. And I really look forward to collaborating with you on a track for this.
Yep, 100%, man. We'll go backward and forward and see what we can make happen. I think it'll be good. There's so many ways we could go with it, but what comes
it
out.
could be about environment or Indigenous, or it was about people or the planet. It could be. He has so many ideas, and
needs to flow like that Columbian River he always talks about.
Yeah.
Excellent, brother. Well, is there anything more you'd like to discuss, or we good to go now? Might spend a bit of time working on it while it's fresh. And
do that, yeah, while it's hot. Yeah, and I'll go to bed. Yeah, it's late for me, so.
Well, I appreciate it very much, Jack, and excellent what you're doing, and thanks again.
No worries. Speak soon.
I still don't understand, don't worry too much about the plan. Gotta wear out some shoes. Give your destiny time to find you. Give your destiny time to find you. Give your destiny time. Gonna cry in shame with a little sun and some rain. We could turn around the darkest pain. I know. Well, I set myself on fire, sip zombie medicine, slip through barbed wire. My steps chasing my desire out into the blue. And give your destiny time to find you. Give your destiny time to find you. Give your destiny time to find you. To find you. Through the rock, water flow. Just take care as you go, humble and kind. Oh, expectation will let you down, but joy can always be found if you're willing to just sit down, share a bite and a brew, and give your destiny time to find you. Give your destiny time. Give your destiny time.